At 81, Linda Evans finally reveals marriage nightmares with John Derek. She had everything: beauty, fame, and a husband every woman in Hollywood wanted, until on Christmas Day, he walked out, for a 17-year-old. This is the shocking truth Linda Evans kept silent for decades. Before she became television royalty, Linda Evans was just Linda Evanstad, a shy girl from a small Norwegian-American family in Hartford, Connecticut. No agents, no fame, just 3 daughters and 2 parents who worked every hour they could to build a decent life. When the family moved to North Hollywood, destiny quietly took its seat. The little girl who once hid behind her mother's apron was suddenly living minutes from the heart of the movie industry. At Hollywood High School, Linda didn't join drama class to chase fame. She joined because she was painfully shy. But once the lights hit her face, something changed. The camera loved her. Casting agents noticed her elegance, her poise, and that soft-spoken grace that couldn't be taught. By the early 1960s, she was appearing on television, earning small parts, building momentum. Her breakthrough came with The Big Valley in 1965, and overnight, America fell in love with Audra Barkley, the stunning yet strong daughter who could hold her own beside legends like Barbara Stanwyck and Lee Majors. Viewers saw the charm, the smile, the quiet confidence, but what they didn't see was a young woman still searching for love, for someone who could understand her world and her insecurities. She had fame. What she didn't have was security. And that's when John Derek walked in. When John Derek entered Linda's life in 1965, he was already the kind of man Hollywood whispered about: tall, magnetic, impossibly handsome, with a camera always hanging from his neck and a reputation that was equal parts genius and trouble. To a young Linda Evans, he looked like the dream. He was older, sophisticated, mysterious, everything she thought a movie star husband should be. He spoke softly but with authority. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. "I fell for him almost instantly," she would later admit. "He made me feel like I was living inside a movie." Their connection was electric, intoxicating, and fast. Within 3 years, they were married, the press hailing them as one of Hollywood's most glamorous couples. Together, they attended red carpet events, posed for magazines, and looked like a living fairy tale. But what the cameras didn't capture was the imbalance forming beneath the surface. Behind closed doors, John's charm began to twist into control. He told her what to wear, how to style her hair, how to move when she walked into a room. At first, Linda thought it was love, that he simply cared about her image. But slowly, that admiration began to feel like ownership. "He wanted to design me," she later confessed, "like one of his photographs." Yet, blinded by love and the fairy tale she'd always imagined, she stayed. She told herself the tension would fade, that he'd change, that passion sometimes just burned too bright. She had no idea that the man she trusted most would soon deliver one of the cruelest betrayals in Hollywood history, and that it would happen on the most joyful day of the year. From the outside, Linda Evans and John Derek looked like Hollywood perfection, the stunning actress and her dashing filmmaker husband, the couple everyone envied. But behind closed doors, the fantasy began to fracture. It started small, subtle, almost invisible. John would comment on how Linda dressed, then how she smiled for photos, then how she spoke in interviews. He wasn't just her husband, he wanted to be her director. "He had an image of me in his mind," Linda later recalled, "and I spent years trying to live up to it." The man who once made her feel seen, now made her feel watched. Every move, every gesture, every breath was under his silent inspection. John Derek, who was older and more experienced, had a confidence that bordered on control. He would tell Linda when to lose weight, how to pose, even what friends to keep. It wasn't love anymore. It was performance. In public, he praised her beauty. In private, he critiqued it. The more Linda tried to please him, the more distant he became. "I thought he was molding me because he cared," she said years later, "but really, he was molding me to feed his own ego." Linda was young, vulnerable, and madly in love. She didn't see the manipulation. She only saw the man she adored, slipping further and further away. And yet, she stayed. Because in Hollywood, image is everything. And walking away from the perfect man would mean admitting the fairy tale was a lie. But love built on control never lasts. And soon, the cracks in their marriage would explode into one of the most scandalous betrayals in Hollywood history. It was Christmas Day, 1973, the kind of day that should have been filled with warmth, laughter, and family. But for Linda Evans, that morning would become a wound she would never forget. John sat her down, quiet and serious. She could sense something was off, a heaviness in the air that didn't belong to Christmas. And then he said it. He was leaving her. Not for another actress, not for a co-star, but for a 17-year-old girl named Mary Kathleen Collins. To the world, she would later be known as Bo Derek. To Linda, she was the reason her world collapsed. "I can still remember his voice," Linda confessed decades later. Calm, almost cold. He didn't even seem guilty, imagine that. It's Christmas morning, your tree still lit, gifts still wrapped, and your husband tells you he's leaving. For someone young enough to be your daughter. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. Hollywood devoured the story. Headlines screamed about the age gap, the scandal, the forbidden love. And in the middle of it all stood Linda Evans, trying to hold herself together while the world whispered. "I was broken," she said, "completely shattered." You think you're building a future, and then one conversation destroys everything. But the pain didn't end there. She soon discovered the affair hadn't started that Christmas morning. It had been going on for months, maybe longer. And while she had been trying to save their marriage, John had been secretly preparing a new one, with someone barely old enough to vote. "I felt old, useless, replaced," Linda admitted. "I was in my 20s, but after that I felt ancient." It was the kind of scandal that could destroy a career, but Linda refused to disappear. She didn't lash out. She didn't go to the tabloids. She just survived. And years later, she'd look back on that day, the day the fairy tale died, and call it the beginning of her rebirth. When John Derek walked out of Linda Evans's life, he didn't just leave a marriage behind. He left her dignity in the crossfire of one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood history. For weeks, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside her home, hungry for quotes, for tears, for any sign of public collapse. But Linda Evans, even in heartbreak, refused to crumble where the cameras could see her. She smiled when she had to. She posed when they asked, and then, when no one was looking, she broke. "I cried for months," she admitted. "There were days I couldn't get out of bed. I kept replaying every word he ever said to me, trying to figure out what I did wrong, but there was no answer that could make sense of it. Because John Derek didn't just leave her for another woman, he left her for a girl still in her teens. And that sting cut deeper than betrayal. It felt like erasure. In a town that worships youth, Linda suddenly felt invisible. The woman who had once graced every magazine cover now felt discarded by both her husband and the industry that had built her up. And yet, somewhere between the humiliation and the heartbreak, something inside her shifted. "I realized," she later said, "that no one was coming to save me. I had to become my own rescue." She started small, long walks, quiet dinners with friends, therapy sessions. She rediscovered cooking, not as a hobby, but as therapy. Mixing, tasting, creating, it was control, something she hadn't had in years. She began to rebuild herself piece by piece, far from the flashing lights of Los Angeles. In time, she found her way back to the screen, stronger, sharper, more self-assured. When she appeared years later as Crystal Carrington on Dynasty, audiences saw the same grace. But behind those calm blue eyes was a woman who had survived hell and come back shining. It wasn't just acting anymore. It was transformation. But the emotional rebuilding didn't happen overnight. Because even as she reclaimed her life, the ghost of John Derek and the pain of that Christmas morning followed her everywhere. And yet, what came next would prove that even heartbreak can become a doorway to healing, and sometimes to enlightenment. When the cameras finally stopped chasing her, Linda Evans made a decision few Hollywood stars would dare make. She walked away. She traded red carpets for quiet mornings in the Pacific Northwest, the roar of the spotlight for the whisper of pine trees outside her window. "I didn't want fame anymore," she said. "I wanted peace." In 1985, searching for meaning beyond the glitz, she was drawn towards spiritual exploration. That journey led her to J.Z. Knight, the controversial metaphysical teacher behind the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. To some, it was strange. To Linda, it was salvation. She began to study Eastern philosophy, meditation, and alternative healing, looking for the kind of strength that doesn't come from applause, but from silence. It was there, in that quiet, that she began to truly understand herself. "I had to unlearn the idea that love comes from someone else," she said. "It starts with you." Always. For the first time in decades, Linda Evans wasn't performing. She was simply living. She bought a 70-acre estate in Washington, surrounded by family, nature, and peace. She cooked, she wrote, she healed. Her cookbook, Recipes for Life, became a kind of autobiography, full of dishes seasoned with laughter, love, and heartbreak. Each story between the recipes wasn't just about food, it was about survival. She admitted that the marriage with John Derek had once made her feel powerless, but leaving it made her unstoppable. "I stopped seeing myself as a victim," she said. "I started seeing myself as the author of my own life." And with time, that newfound strength led her to open her heart again. This time to Yanni, the world-famous musician. Their relationship, built on mutual respect and creativity, lasted nearly a decade. It was different. It was calm. It was healing. Looking back, Linda doesn't call her past a tragedy. She calls it a lesson. "The pain taught me to see the truth," she reflected, "to love deeply, but never lose myself again." Now, at 81, Linda Evans lives with the serenity that comes only after surviving the storm. She's no longer the heartbroken actress hiding from tabloids. She's a woman who faced the darkest parts of love and turned them into light. In her words, "I don't regret any of it. Not John, not the pain, not even the heartbreak. Because I survived, and survival, that's my greatest victory." There comes a moment in every great story when the pain finally meets its purpose, and for Linda Evans, that moment came not in front of cameras, but in front of her own reflection. Years had passed since John Derek had walked out. Hollywood had changed. Fame had come and gone. But Linda, the woman the world once pitied, was still standing, stronger, wiser, unshakable. When she finally spoke about that painful Christmas day decades later, there was no bitterness left in her voice, only clarity. "I don't regret marrying him," she said softly, "because through him, I learned everything I needed to know about love and about myself." And when you look at old footage of her, smiling on the Dynasty set, holding her head high beside Joan Collins, radiating grace, you realize something remarkable. Every scene she filmed, every line she delivered as Crystal Carrington came from real emotion. The strength, the dignity, the calm in the middle of chaos, that wasn't acting. That was Linda Evans, channeling the woman she had become through survival. Her co-stars admired her, fans adored her, but few truly knew the quiet resilience it took to play that role. Behind the glamour and the fame was a woman who had walked through betrayal, humiliation, and loss, and somehow found her soul intact. "People see fame as power," she once said, "but real power is surviving something that should have destroyed you, and still having love in your heart." And Linda did love again. Not in the naive fairy tale way she once believed in, but with the grounded, peaceful love that comes only after you've been broken and rebuilt. Her long relationship with Yanni, the celebrated composer, showed a new version of her, content, creative, unguarded. For nearly a decade, they lived, worked, and dreamed together. And even when that chapter ended, it ended with mutual respect, not pain. That was the difference. This time, Linda walked away whole. It was as if she had rewritten her own story, from the woman who was left to the woman who leaves with grace. By the time she reached her 80s, she no longer chased the spotlight. She didn't need it, because her legacy wasn't written in gossip columns or magazine covers, it was written in survival. Today, Linda Evans lives far from the noise of Los Angeles, surrounded by trees, family, and peace. Her home in Washington isn't a mansion built for parties, it's a sanctuary built for healing. In the quiet of the countryside, she cooks, meditates, and reflects on the life she once lived under the blinding lights of fame. Her days aren't filled with premieres and interviews. They're filled with sunlight, with laughter, and with gratitude. And when she speaks now, her words don't sound like those of a star. They sound like those of a philosopher. "I survived," she says simply, and sometimes that's enough. Because survival is its own kind of success. The woman who once defined glamour has become something far rarer, a symbol of resilience in an industry that often forgets its heroes once the lights go out. When fans meet her, they don't talk about Dynasty or the scandals of the past. They talk about strength, forgiveness, and how her story helped them through their own heartbreaks. She became more than an actress. She became a mirror, reflecting what it means to fall apart and still find beauty in the rebuilding. And the most poetic part? Even after everything, she never spoke with hatred toward John Derek or Bo Derek. She chose compassion. "I don't blame Bo," she said. "She was young and he was powerful. I hope she found peace." We all deserve that. That level of forgiveness, that kind of peace, is something only time and wisdom can give. Now, in her 80s, when she looks back on her life, she doesn't see failure. She sees a story, messy, tragic, beautiful, that taught her what real strength looks like. "I thought my story ended the day he left me," she once said. "But that was just the beginning. Because what came after was me." And that's the legacy of Linda Evans. Not the scandal, not the heartbreak, but the survival. A woman who walked through fire, came out shining, and proved that even the brightest stars can find their light again, long after the cameras stop rolling. When Linda Evans talks about her past today, she doesn't do it with tears in her eyes. She does it with a quiet smile. Because after everything, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the fame, the fall, she finally found what she had been chasing all along: peace. But peace didn't come easy. It came after decades of learning what love is not. It came after realizing that beauty fades, fame vanishes, and approval is a currency that never lasts. "I spent years trying to be perfect," she said once, "but perfection is just fear wearing makeup." Those words hit harder when you remember who she was. Linda Evans, the Hollywood golden girl, the face of elegance, the woman every magazine called America's sweetheart. And yet, under all that glamour, was someone who had to rebuild her self-worth from nothing. She admits she stayed too long in a broken marriage because she wanted the fairy tale to work, because she believed that love could fix everything. But it didn't. And when it all fell apart, she discovered something deeper than love: truth. Her truth was painful, but it freed her. She stopped chasing perfection and started chasing peace. She began speaking openly about self-acceptance, aging, and forgiveness, subjects few stars dared to touch. While Hollywood tried to erase its aging icons, Linda stood tall and said, "I'm proud of every wrinkle, they're proof that I lived." Those words turned her into something more than a former TV star. They made her a voice of wisdom in a world obsessed with youth. When she appeared in interviews, audiences leaned in. She didn't sell gossip, she gave perspective. And that's why her story still resonates. Because it's not just about heartbreak, it's about evolution. Linda Evans didn't just survive Hollywood, she outgrew it. Today, at 81 years old, Linda Evans lives in Washington State, surrounded by mountains, trees, and quiet. No red carpets, no paparazzi, no pressure to pretend. And maybe that's the most poetic ending Hollywood could never write. Because while others chase the spotlight, Linda found something brighter: her own light. She spends her days cooking, walking her land, meditating, and writing. Friends say she glows, not the way she did in her 20s, but with that rare kind of peace that only comes from surviving every storm and realizing the sun was inside you all along. When people ask her if she ever thinks about John Derek, she doesn't hesitate. "I wish him peace," she says, "and I'm grateful for what he taught me, even the pain." That's not weakness, that's mastery. Because forgiveness isn't saying it was okay, it's saying I'm done carrying it. And that's exactly what Linda Evans has done. Her story has become a quiet anthem for anyone who's ever loved too hard, trusted too deeply, or lost themselves trying to be enough for someone else. She's proof that you can start over at any age, that heartbreak isn't the end, it's the beginning of your own freedom. And when she looks back on her life now, she doesn't see tragedy. She sees a masterpiece, painted with mistakes, courage, and survival. "I thought love was about holding on," she once said, "but real love, the kind that saves you, is about letting go." That's the final lesson of Linda Evans. Not the scandal, not the betrayal, but the rebirth. The moment when a woman, once broken by Hollywood's cruel illusions, stepped out of the camera's glare and discovered something far greater than fame: herself. And that's why her name still echoes, not as a fallen star, but as a survivor who turned heartbreak into light. Because in the end, the story of Linda Evans isn't a Hollywood tragedy. It's a reminder that no matter who leaves, who betrays, or what breaks, you can always rebuild, you can always rise, and you can always begin again.
If you enjoyed this story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really makes us smile. And if you're hungry for more fascinating tales, check out the 2 videos right below. You might just discover your next favorite story.